Welcome back to the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles Collegians Summit 2023. It is great to be together. Don't forget, if you have comments or questions and you're watching live, you can put them into the comments. Ryan will get them. He'll get them to me. We have a few. Also, if we solicited questions in the weeks before this, so we've got some lined up. We'll get to those as we go. And so thank you for that in advance. And don't forget, visit phyllisschlafly.com as we refer to different aspects of our work. It's there. You can find most of it. Our next guest, another congressman, Congressman Barry Loudermilk of Georgia. It's the 11th Congressional District. He served in the military. He was mentioning off air that he did intelligence work in the military, owned a business, served in the Georgia legislature, and currently, as I mentioned, represents the 11th Congressional District in Georgia. So, Congressman, welcome. We're talking to college students. I wanted you to explain something, though. You know, I come from St. Louis, and Phyllis is from Illinois. And so for, I don't know, a couple of years, everyone talked about how the House Administration Committee, if we got the majority, a guy named Rodney Davis from Southern Illinois would be the chair. And he was sort of, I don't know if groomed is the right word, but he'd been thinking he had, I think he was the minority member, right?
Yep.
And he didn't win his election. So lo and behold, what people say is one of the 2 or 3 more important chairmanships, especially practically. There's some other ones that are, you end up that chair. So first of all, were you ready for that? Did you see that coming? Did you lay it in bed as a boy and think someday I'll be the chairman of the House Administrations Committee?
Well, that's the way it worked out. I mean, the press went absolutely crazy when I was a senior Republican on the committee because of the false allegations they made against me about giving reconnaissance tours of the Capitol.
Right.
And so the press went absolutely nuts on it. But one of the things that the speaker had in mind, and it ended up, I didn't end up being the chair of the full House Administration Committee, but we created a special subcommittee that kind of balances between House Administration and working in the Speaker's office. But we put it under House Administration so it would have natural jurisdictional boundaries. And the purpose of the committee is to actually have oversight over over Capitol Hill that we've never had before. Our normal jurisdiction is everything from Library of Congress, the security of the Capitol, the Smithsonian's, Botanic Gardens,
Right.
The food services that's here, everything that happens on Capitol Hill, as well as the administration of the House of Representatives. However, there was one special area that the speaker wanted me to focus my efforts, and that was what really happened on January 6th and the actions of the Select Committee on January 6th.
Right.
So while we're doing some of the other things, like we had a big hearing last week on the Office of Congressional Ethics to where it was uncovered that the chief counsel, the guy who is supposedly holding members of Congress in check for ethics has been arrested on numerous occasions and has even had sexual harassment charges against him. And this is the guy that's over the ethics, right?
Wow.
So we're actually uncovering a lot of the corruption, if you will, that's on Capitol Hill. But the majority of my time, 85% of my time that I'm here and I'm awake is dealing with what really happened on January 6th.
Congressman Barry Loudermilk is our guest, and I should say your staff has been very kind to me. I represent a couple of the guys that are in trouble for January 6th, and I serve on one of the boards, so they've been great at helping me go and see the video and all that. Watch this. So what really happened? I mean, or let me say it, don't try to answer that yet. When might we know more? Or when might we be able to put the mosaic together better?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I have a solid answer on it because we are looking for the truth. And the truth is a lot harder to get to versus having a preconceived idea of what you wanted to happen and then just selecting evidence to support that theory. That's what the Select Committee on January 6th did. We're coming at this from a truly objective approach. Go where the facts lead. And so it's taking time, but also we're kind of working in the shadows, if you will, because we're not doing this to just get press coverage. We want to get to the real truth of what happened. We're actually a little further along than I thought we would be at this time. I'm hoping by the end of the year we'll have a good snapshot of really what transpired, what happened. Look, there was bad people that did bad things that day. There's no doubt about it. There are people that broke the law. But what we're trying to find out is how did these folks get into the Capitol? It's unusual for a protest, even of this size, to turn violent that quickly.
Right.
But also, where was the failures in our security? Why were we not ready for this to happen? And so as our focus has been really on where were the security failures? How did the breach of the Capitol happen? You start uncovering other things, other suspicious things, and you run down those trails. And a lot of them turn out to be, there's more conspiracy theories on January 6th than you could put in the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? And so it's a challenge to run down every one of those theories. And I'd say most of them that we've found a reasonable answer to why something happened. For instance, there's been the videos of the Capitol Police supposedly opening doors and letting protesters in. Well, what we found out through a lot of investigation, a lot of looking at different camera angles, is they were actually trying to get some protesters that they had corralled and get them out of the Capitol. They opened a fire exit door, which cannot be relocked without somebody coming with a key to relock it. So when they opened those doors, the crowds were able to come in.
I see.
But there's other things that we're still looking into, and one that we just released a couple of weeks ago was that we know that there were plainclothes law enforcement officers in the crowd, which doesn't surprise me. You would expect there to be some.
Have to be, yeah.
But there was at least one instance of one encouraging people to go into the Capitol.
Right.
So
I probably want to come back, but I want to go to that select committee, because if you're a defendant, and I've sat in on some of these trials, the juries in this district, they are so hostile to January 6th. And again, you're allowed to be, it's America, you're allowed to be hostile to whatever you want, right? But at a certain point, you look at it and you say, the media has been lying about a lot of people a lot of times. That's one thing. But when the select committee spends millions of dollars,
$18.5 million.
To selectively highlight things and not get to the bottom of other things. And I'll make a confession. Here it is. I was subpoenaed by the select committee and I ignored it. I figured, let's see if they want to come around again. I just figured that, are they going to go the Bannon treatment and they must not have thought. So I never got followed up. But a lot of people it was like targeted of people that they thought could help them tell the story of hate and anti-Semitism and all this cherry picking, using TV, using these. I'm for politics. I believe in politics, but that was really nasty. And how can they be held accountable?
Well, that's what we're looking at right now, is how can we hold them accountable? Great illustration of how they manipulated so-called evidence to fit their narrative was what they did to me. And that was one of the first things we worked on. And I kind of felt self-serving a little bit, but let's put it in perspective. We were handed over 2 million printed pages of documents that weren't indexed very well, terabytes of data. And this is the information, supposedly. We thought at the time it was all the information from the January 6th committee. We're finding out right now we're missing a lot. So we're tracking down where is that information. But somebody said, it's like, somebody just threw a 1,000-piece puzzle on the table and said, put it pieces together. I said, it was worse than that. They threw it on the table and they said, they didn't give you a picture. I said, no, they gave you the wrong picture.
All right. Exactly,
and so we've got this wrong picture of what happened with all this information. So a good starting point was I knew what they did to me. And so what we uncovered, first of all, they actually subpoenaed 2 people that came to my office on January 5th. Now, these were just some constituents and their friends who had planned in advance to be in Washington, D.C. This family that we had met at a church, and they had volunteered with our campaign. They came to D.C. because they had never heard Donald Trump speak, and by their own words, this is the only time that they'll probably ever get to hear him, because they were convinced he had lost the election. So they weren't here to overturn anything, right? And they had never been to Washington, D.C. They had some friends from Georgia that came with them, and they asked if they could visit my office. They had never been to D.C., never met a congressman before.
Right.
So they came just like it happens anytime, right?
Yeah.
And we just took them to lunch in one of the House office buildings, showed them a couple of things, which the House office buildings were open for visitors. It was 3 days after swearing in. You got a lot of families and stuff there to the gift shop, and they left. So this January 6th committee subpoenas 2 of those visitors. And so as I'm talking to them more recently, why did they pick you guys? They said, well, we had actually been contacted by federal agents because they knew we were in D.C. They interviewed us. They knew we didn't even go into the Capitol January 6th. They saw things weren't looking right and they left. So apparently, maybe the FBI or Homeland Security turned those names over. Well, that wasn't good enough for the January 6th committee because they needed this. They were trying to build a narrative that there were Republicans involved in a conspiracy.
Right.
And I was low-hanging fruit.
Right.
So through looking through all the evidence that they obtained, we were able to show that the committee knew a full month before they made the accusation against me that there was nothing to it. They had subpoenaed these 2 people, but they subpoenaed them because they used a debit card to buy a gift in the gift shop, right? So that's how they knew they were there.
Right.
Big crime.
Right.
But they had subpoenaed them, deposed them, and actually took all the information off their phones. And the videos that they took from those people proved that there was nothing to it. But the committee then took certain camera angles and edited the surveillance camera to make it look like there was something nefarious going on when there wasn't. And they knew it a month before. And then when the Capitol Police came out with a letter, said, we've looked at all the video angles. There's nothing even suspicious here, that Loudermilk has done nothing wrong. Then they doubled down and made another level of accusation. In 1 week, I got 200 death threats for being a traitor. I mean, and so they didn't come to me and ask me to come speak to them. They went to the media and told the media that that they were asking me to come
That's
in.
my point. That's my point. Again, you tell me. You and Congressman Sessions, Jason Smith's going to be here later. Right. It's tough business, and sometimes you're in a business, even amongst the 435. You break your word or whatever. But that's such bad faith.
It is, and
with American citizens. Again, you go and listen to these juries, and they're sending people away for years, and they're getting death threats against you. And why? For this deranged notion to define something. But here's the problem: it kind of worked, didn't it?
It did, but even this weekend, my wife was reading me some things off of Facebook. We posted something about Juneteenth and the history of Juneteenth, and some guy comes on and he starts blasting me just because they do that. And then this guy in our district goes to my defense, says, I think he's a good guy. He's doing a good job. And some other lady goes, what do you mean good job? He's a traitor. I saw the videos of where he gave reconnaissance tours.
Exactly.
And I'm like, how do you get over this? And then they have really sold it. But one of the shocking things to me was when I actually went and started looking at the 44,000 hours of video, there's no sound. There's no audio. But if you watched the January 6th committee, you heard audio with every one of them.
Made for TV with all this action that was like
that was dubbed on. They actually had a Hollywood producer in there putting this on. This was all a show. And I bring this up about accountability because one of the people that they subpoenaed who did nothing wrong came to my office, visited, went to lunch with us, left. On January 6th, never got any closer than 500 yards of the Capitol. They have ruined his life. He's already been fired from one position. Because all you got to do is Google his name, and they outed his name in the final report, which was a lie that he was given a reconnaissance tour of the Capitol, and they've ruined his life. They have to be held accountable.
But so now let me say this about this for people like later on this in the Collegians Summit, and again we're talking with Congressman Barry Loudermilk. Among his roles in Congress, he does a lot. He's the chair of this committee of the House Administration, and so. But when someone acts, you have kids. When someone acts so crazy about something, you say, "What's that about? Like, what's that? What's that covering?" And sometimes it's anger or whatever. They hated Trump. But they won. They fortified their election and they won. And yet they went through 18 months of this just dragging people, destroying them, and changing the perceived history into an armed insurrection where you still, I know you do it, I mean, I do it, you say, January 6th, people say, it was an armed insurrection. And why? Like what? In other words, you usually don't act like that if you're not covering something up. That's how it feels. That's how it feels. I mean, I'm not saying I know. That's your job to find out to know. But I mean, such bad faith.
And a lot of it we're looking at is we got to be able to get to the truth. And then once we find the truth, then look at it. how much was spent covering it up?
Right.
And we know where the security failures happened. We don't know who. I mean, there was clear intelligence. There was violence against the Capitol going to happen by certain select groups.
Right.
And that intelligence made it to the intelligence division of the Capitol Police, but they sat on it.
Right.
They never sent it. The chief didn't even know about it.
Right.
Was that purposeful? Was it accidental? Was it just incompetence? Regardless, there was a huge cover-up of that. And one of the things that we've realized now we don't have any documents of is the select committee on January 6th was split up into operational teams, okay? So they had a red team and a blue team and orange team. Well, the blue team's responsibility was uncovering where the security failures of the Capitol Police were, or the Capitol, and how this will never happen again. Well, if you went through the glossy final production report that the J6 committee put out, there's nothing in there about that. We go to look for the documents from that blue team. They're not in existence. It's like the blue team never existed. So one question is, why didn't you include this in your report? Whether there was a failure, what happened, how did people get in? And then where are all the documents? And we do know that there was a lot of documents. This raises suspicion of a cover-up as well.
Yeah.
So
we have to finish. So I just want to finish and say this. Our next guest is Jeff Clark, who is going through a terrible set of attacks because he practiced law and happened to work for government. You happen to be a congressman, and you were in the way, so they made this reconnaissance allegation. And my point is, it's been so weaponized now against, I don't know, center right. I mean, I never asked Jeff Clark about all his politics. Maybe I will on issues. I think he's conservative, but it's just if you're on the wrong team now, they're taking you out. And they're not being shy about it, and they're not being slow about it. And I don't know what that means. Most people that are conservatives and don't want to, we don't want to spend our time hating. In fact, the readings today when I went to church were about love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. Well, that's a pretty high bar right now for me, and I'm sure it is for you. But it's a problem because one side's armies are rolling over us, and a lot of us are saying, let's just make the system work better.
Right.
Well, the system is not holding off the armies.
No, it's not. It's not. And the narrative continues. You can sit in any committee meeting, and it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. Ultra MAGA Republicans will be used by the Democrats, and over and over again, they want to keep that narrative going. But there's four things that I realize American people just want from their federal government: transparency, accountability, responsibility, and civility. And they're not getting any of those. Oh. And that's what we're fighting for. Myself, Jim Jordan with Judiciary and the Weaponization Committee, and Jamie Comer with the Oversight Committee, we're working together on all this. And I think we're going to continue. And we're not doing it for political purposes. And that's one thing that's hard for the media to understand. Is I'm not doing this for politics. I'm doing it because I love my country, and the truth needs to come out. We're never going to fix the problem unless we know what the root of the problem is.
And they pissed you off.
Yeah, that's true. That may be a little. That's
good. I'm happy. I'm sorry you went through it, and your wife.
Well, that may be a motivating factor to keep me going when the days get really dark.
Can you imagine when people that were thinking they got through this, and they're like, Rodney Davis, we get along with Rodney. We didn't do anything to him. And they're like, oh, what? They got Loudermilk? He's the one we did the video on, I mean,
Kevin McCarthy, who was a minority leader at the time, he called me because we found out when I'm literally on a plane flying back home to Atlanta was when I find out. And then my picture is on every TV screen. There's CNN, people flying to and from D.C. mostly watch CNN or MSNBC. I'm usually the only guy watching Fox, right? Yeah. My picture is on every screen. My wife is like, put a mask on. So I get to Atlanta, and
is it this younger picture? No, this is maybe this job is taken out.
Anyway, but Kevin McCarthy calls. He said, of all people, why are they coming after you? I said, Kevin, I don't know, but they just picked on the wrong congressman because I'm not going to sit back and just let this blow over. Yeah. We're going to fight back.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming to see us.
Right.
We appreciate it.
Thanks for the work you guys do.
We appreciate it, and your staff especially. We'll take a break and come back. Jeff Clark, right after the break, you're with us for the Collegians Summit 2023. Send in your questions. I'm sorry, I was asking all the questions of Congressman Loudermilk, but I had them pent up, and we'll get to them and more after this break.